Okay. All right, everyone. Well, hello. Thanks for coming to today's talk. I am gonna share my screen with you all. Um, let's see. Okay. Now, we are all here to talk about Gestalt language processing. Now, I tried to make this rather introductory, um, and as such, it might seem a little repetitive to some of you who have had a little bit more um, discussions with your SLPs about Gestalt language processing. Um, if you have, or if there's any error in like the loading of the pages or anything like that, please just feel free to turn off your mic or to turn on your mic just to let me know. Um, okay. And I just want to disclose that this is an adaptation of a course that a couple of my colleagues and I took by Meaningful Speech with Alexandria Zafos and Marge Blanc. I also have no financial disclosures to give to you all, other than that I really care about all of the kids that we're going to talk about today. Okay. So let's talk about what we know about language development. This could be a great opportunity for you all to unmic and just shout out some things that you know about language development from your own children. You're also welcome to use the chat if you'd like to do that. Okay, I see something in the chat. We know about echolalia. Okay, great thing to start off with, Christine. Um, some things that I'm thinking about too, as well, are that we like maybe that the kids start. Okay, Natalie mentioned scripting. Um, some things that I'm thinking about too are receptive sometimes comes first. That's great. Um, maybe like babbling then leads to use of words and longer sentences. Um, I'm gonna leave a few more seconds for anybody else to chime in if you'd like. I like what you're saying that all of this is great so far too.
I think I can quickly share verbally a lot of repetition, but building off of repetition is quite helpful.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay, great. I like that. Um, that's something that we're going to end up revisiting in this talk too. GLP versus traditional language processing and what that means. Great. So perfect, because that's what we're going to end up talking about. Um, okay, so you may have seen these signs up and around the clinic and academy. Is your child a Gestalt language processor? And this is really intentionally placed around the clinic and the academy so that we can better identify the kids who are GLPs. Um, some indicators are that, like, quote unquote, traditional therapy approaches, like building the vocabulary or modeling the expansion of the child language. So some of that I use with the parents who I work with are like the add one word strategy. So that's to say that a kid uses one word and then sorry, I'm reading the chat too. Oh, of course. Yeah, the signs started a good conversation at home. That's great. So the add one word strategy is that if a kid uses one word, then we model using two words. So if they say ball, we can say red ball or go ball or something like that. Um, quote unquote taught phrases, which we'll learn towards the end of this presentation, have not progressed. That means that the kids have this like stuck language that we really can't move away from, or we can't use to process in a different way, or to use to communicate the same message in a different way. Similarly, with single words being stuck. I outlined some of the learning outcomes for today's session. And so when each one that's highlighted is going to be the focus of the next two slides. So let's distinguish the difference between echolalia and delayed echolalia. First, what do we know about echolalia? Let's start with what we already know about it. This is another time that you can use the chat, or you can just feel free to unmic. It can be words or sounds. It's great. Oh, I just saw that there's a couple people in the waiting room. Okay. Sorry to everyone who's just joining us. We have not talked too much about the content that you all probably likely came here for. We're just establishing some of the basics of what we know about language development, and currently we're talking about what we know about echolalia. Yeah, Christine, I hear what you're saying, that there's lots of repetition of what your child says, or what you say and what the child says. That's exactly right. So I'm gonna exit the screen just for a second to show you this video, and without comprehension. Let's see. I think that this is the one that I want to show. This is an example of, oh, sorry, I'm looking at Reggie's comment here too. Echolalia happens when my child repeats after me instead of responding accordingly to the prompt or question. Great. That's exactly what we're talking about. Now, listen to the way that this child here repeats what his mom says in this video.
Oh, sorry. What you doing today? What's you doing? What we doing? What are you doing? What we're doing? What we're doing? Okay, talk to you later.
Were you all able to hear that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, perfect. Sorry, we did not learn tech savvy skills in grad school for speech. But you could hear in that video that like the kid was playing on the phone, it's hello, how are you? What are you doing today? And so that's what we call immediate echolalia. Now to go back, we also talk about delayed echolalia. Just because I know that I have a lot of videos in this presentation, I think it's easier to kind of keep it at this screen, so you might see me so as to avoid going back and forth so much. But so the immediate echolalia is exactly what it sounds like. It's that echo. Now, I have a note here that immediate echolalia can be considered processing. It's a way that the kids are understanding that something was said to them, that they're listening, that there's some kind of attention and engagement piece there. Now, delayed echolalia is like what it sounds like, where the language is echoed from somewhere else that they heard before this immediate experience. Now, throughout this presentation, we will call those delayed echolalia gestalts, or sometimes scripts. This is language that's stored as a chunk and repeated later for a reason. So that means that it's emotionally driven. So something that one of my clients says to me occasionally when we're playing in the ball pit in the clinic is the drop off. They're going to the drop off, which comes from Finding Nemo, which, because I'm familiar with that movie, it makes total sense to me that he's standing on top of the ball pit. He's about to jump off into the ball pit, and he equates this this memory of Nemo and Marlin going to the drop off and connecting it to what he's experiencing in that moment. Now, if you were not familiar with that movie or with that or with what that might mean to the speaker, it kind of feels like it's coming out of nowhere. Now I'm going to switch to another video and confirm if you can hear the sound. I think it's this one. Yes. This is from the course that I took that's all about Gestalt language processing. Just give it a second because the video itself kind of lags too. Let's see.
It's a shark!
It's a shark!
I actually don't know if you heard that because I'm not sure if my sound was sharing. So I'm going to play it just one more time.
It's a shark!
It's a shark!
Okay, so Jane's Gestalt there is, it's a shark, but that was really all I could make out. If you really listened closely, the beginning almost sounded like jargon, but I think it's a shark was part of a longer Gestalt, and that came from Little Einstein's, which is a special interest of Jane's and where a lot of her scripts come from.
Okay, I'll stop it there. So the reason I chose to use, the reason I decided to use this video to, sorry, let me just go back to the presentation, to highlight what these scripts could look like is because, again, it seems kind of like not referential. She's the girl in the video, Jane, is eating popcorn and she says it's a shark. Now, Alexandria in the video mentioned that it comes from Little Einstein's. That's a special interest of Jane. But other than that, we don't have the context of what this might mean to her. And that's where this chart that should pull up as well comes in. So if you have experience with Gestalt language processing in speech therapy already, some of your SLPs might be talking to you about communicative functions. That's to say that there are reasons that we use language to communicate. These are just a few. We use language to make comments, to ask for help, to request transitions or protest or express joy. There's quite literally hundreds of ways that we use language to communicate. And the job of the SLP, and in conjunction with the family, is to figure out what gestalts the Gestalt language processor is using to fulfill these communicative functions. So if we're thinking about, sorry, just to let a couple more people in. If we're thinking about like the drop off, we're going to the drop off, like that could be a comment, that could be a transition, like we're going, or it could be something that he's expressing joy, like I like it. Now for it's a shark, I would think that that's a comment, even though it's technically incorrect because in the video she was talking about popcorn. That would still fulfill this like checkbox of what the child is using, what function of language the child is using. Now, this is another opportunity where you can use the chat or unmic, where in your own words, let's describe immediate echolalia versus delayed echolalia. So let's start with immediate echolalia.
I think I really agreed with Reginald Montgomery's example, which is where like I've prompted my son I'm asking him a question and then I provide the options of answers, meaning I'll say yes or no. And then what I get back is yes or no, right? Like he doesn't know I want the yes, either a yes or a no. He just says yes or no.
Sure.
That to me is like immediate echolalia. An example of a delayed echolalia, like my son tends to like memorize like random things. So like, for instance, like we've been reading Hop on Pop, and then like out of nowhere, he'll just say, no, Pat, no, don't sit on that. And then, it's just like, I don't see the context. We're not about to sit that's going to give us an owie or anything like that, but like he'll just kind of pull it out. And I think that for him, like you said, I didn't know there were like functions of that. And it seems like he really loves saying that and then cracking up. So that to me is he's expressing some sort of joy. I did not, like, now that I know that, I will try to look out for like what about the situation is like making him happy. And so he decided to like use that phrase as his expression of joy. But he does that a lot where he just kind of has like random things that he's picked up from like story time that he really enjoys repeating.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's a great example. Um, and the thing is that, like, as we mentioned a couple slides ago, is that these gestalts are emotionally driven. And so to the speaker, it has this meaning that the job of the SLP is to investigate what that meaning is. So even though um, we might have an idea that like this is an expression of joy, it could be like actually the opposite. And so that's where, this is where like the parents and the SLP work together. So I know that I turn to parents a lot of times when if something is not if I can't easily understand something, then the parent sometimes is in the room and is like, oh, like he's saying that he has to go to the bathroom. I'm like, oh, how could you have picked that up? But because you all know your children so well, that's where this collaboration can really help your child. So by saying something like, no, pet, no, like, is that a way that the child is saying, please stop, I don't like that? That's where, again, this collaboration can come to play. Now, does anybody else have any ideas for either immediate echolalia or delayed echolalia? These could be examples that you experience, or even some wins, some frustrations, anything.
I know for us at our house for years, we had the response of, or she would offer up, "Are you okay?" to us when she wanted us to check in on her, which is kind of like, I guess, a delayed because she would use it for so long. But in the moment when we were teaching her that, it was that immediate, like, "Are you okay?" And then she would come back to us and repeat it back to us, "Are you okay?" And really all she wanted was us to check in with her and see how she's doing.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because that's an example that I have that I kind of planned for later on. The "Are you okay?" I see in the chat as well that they have rich intonation. Um, and yes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what intonation looks like for communication with GLPs as well. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that point, Emily. Moving along, if that's okay, unless someone else has something to share. I wanted to kind of bookend that we talked about echolalia and delayed echolalia. And now we're going to shift a little bit to talking about analytic language processing and Gestalt language processing. These are two ways that kids can learn language. Now this is going to be, this is all transparent, that analytic language processing is the kind of quote unquote standard historically, not anymore, but historically, of learning language. This is the kind of language processing that your SLPs have learned in graduate school. This has been historically the only way of learning language. And Gestalt language processing started to become relevant in research only in the 80s, like 1983. And if any of you are familiar with science and research, it takes years and decades to develop data and research to then spread throughout the field. And so that's kind of the critical time that we're in right now, where this information is, although 40 years old in research and data, is relatively new in treatment. And so the classes, the coursework that I have taken and that my colleagues have taken about Gestalt language processing has been in addition to our graduate school work. It was maybe only touched upon in grad school. That's to say that it's that new. We are in that part of research. Analytic language processors. Now, this is likely how you and I learned language. Maybe some of your own kids as well, where we kind of start off vocalizing and then babbling. We use your first words, then longer phrases, sentences, conversation. This is like a top-down kind of approach to learning where you start small and expand to the conversation level. This is where we might think about like quote unquote typical development. And this is not to say that that diverse learners cannot learn language analytically. They certainly can. But this is typically seen in a neurotypical population. And we are going to bounce back and forth a bunch between talking about analytic language processing and Gestalt language processing. Now, I added this slide in here as a way to kind of like, I found this quite grounding in my understanding of just even the word Gestalt. It's a German word. I didn't have any other context to understanding what the word means. But by definition, it's an organized whole that's perceived as more than a sum of its parts. So in psychology, if we look at a picture like that I have here on the slide, you know, we see one item like a triangle. We don't necessarily see these like three little Pac-Man figures that make up the triangle. Or you might see, I don't know what to call this, like a little bit of like a house or a building block. We don't necessarily see the two different shades. And that's because our brains see it all as one entity more than we see it as a collection of things that come together. And so when you talk about Gestalt language processing, it's kind of a really, or not kind of, it certainly is a really fitting term for that the kids or the learners see language chunks as an organized whole rather than a collection of things that hold individual meaning. And I can explain that further. So where we talked about how analytic language processing starts with this, oops, I see someone else is trying to join. Okay. Where we see that Gestalt language processing starts with this, or I'm sorry, I think I got a little mixed up there. We mentioned that analytic language processing starts with this babbling, single words, and then eventually into conversation. Now we're going to flip that. And so we start off with this larger chunk of language or a script or a gestalt. And then then the Gestalt language processor eventually learns the individual meaning of the word. Now, we talked about delayed echolalia, and the Gestalt language processor will use a lot of delayed echolalia, even if we're not always realizing it. And that's to say that a lot of times it's pretty well in context to what we're talking about. Now, the language can come from things that they've heard, movies, shows, iPad games, YouTube videos, but also just things that we as adults or the kids around them have heard, or I'm sorry, have said. The chunks are units of meaning that are not flexible. So, can we go to the ball? I have a kid who every time he sees me, he says, "Mr. Big Anthony, can we go to the ball pit?" No matter what time of day it is, no matter what activity we're doing, it always serves this communicative function of a greeting. "Mr. Big Anthony, can we go to the ball pit?" Or I have another kid who I work with, who, in order to initiate a play scheme, will say, "Listen to music, Humpty Dumpty." There's also gestalts like "good job," which is used every time an activity is completed, or "it's showtime" every time something new starts. You notice that I use an intentional intonation for like "it's showtime," because it's likely said in that same way every single time, similar to what we already discussed in the chat, that GLPs have this rich intonation. So the point that I want to drive home to you on this slide is this comparison between analytic language processing being kind of one word expanding to longer sentences, and Gestalt language processing being these longer sentences that then go down to one word. So if a kid were to say, "Can we go to the ball pit?" versus "let's go." You see, I hope that you can see this distinction of what a GLP might say and that's meaningful to them versus what an ALP, an analytic language processor, might say in a little bit more of succinct language. Which brings me back to this slide, that again, we are always looking for what language the kids are using in order to fulfill these communicative functions. I see something in the chat. How does this learning style affect a child's ability to be multilingual? That is a great, that's a great question. Sorry, I actually see a lot of other messages too. Okay, I'm glad that definition resonated with you too. That actually, admittedly, that's a great question that I might have to get back to during part 2. As far as I understand, it is absolutely possible for the kids to learn more than one language at the same time. Where I think it might be a little bit more, I think that it might be a little bit more context specific, but it's something that I do want to answer with more clarity. So I am going to pause on that. And if anything, it can be in a follow-up email. I'm just going to take a quick note. Dipali, did you have a question?
No.
Wait, was that a yes or a no? Sorry, I just heard your mic.
No.
Okay. Okay, so here we are. We're talking about Gestalt language processing. It's also referred to as natural language acquisition, which, just kind of like taking a step back and thinking about just the way that we talk about learning language through Gestalt is learning language naturally. That's something that I think that resonates quite well with me, that we are not forcing language upon anybody. We are not forcing anybody to conform, but we are just trying to help them learn language in a way that's natural to them. And so echolalia, as we already discussed, just as an example, there's a monster at the end of this book, which likely comes from a story where they say that. That's stage 1, is echolalia. Now, in stage 2, we call it mitigated, but something that's mitigated is something that we can mix and match or dissect in some kind of way. So the speaker might say something like, there's a monster under there, or oh, there's a monster. In stage 3, this is where analytical language processors begin. So that's when the kids can start using a single word that has that individual meaning. Some of you with whom I work might have heard me refer to this as segmentation of speech or segmentation of words, where the kids can now pull apart this word from this larger gestalt, and now it has its own meaning. So instead of it being this whole thing like there's a monster at the end of this book, they have the understanding of monster. Now, and hopefully this doesn't confuse you too much, but there is such a thing of single word echolalia or delayed echolalia. And so what that means is that our kids might be able to see a giraffe and say giraffe, but can they then put it into a different word combination, like tall giraffe or scary giraffe or a yellow giraffe? Can they take that word and use a describing word or an action word to go along with it? If they cannot do that, then they are likely not using a stage 3 gestalt. They're probably still using a stage 1 gestalt. It be in the way that it's stuck. You can't expand upon it. I'm just popping into the chat really quick. I find these strategies very fluid based on our child's emotional regulation or based on sensory inputs from new or loud or busy places. Just letting the other parents know that as a parent of a kid who shows up in our home at stage 6, but at school presents in an early stage very often. Yes, I'm glad that you brought that up. That there certainly is a fluidity in which stage the child currently presents in. Now, as the SLP, what I look for is which stage is the child in most. So if they are most of the time in stage 3, then I would consider them a stage 3 GLP, or in this example that James said, stage 6. But there will certainly be times where they default to stage 1. Now, I'm thinking of another kid who I work with who will have the most beautiful, rich intonation, great language based on the activity that we're talking about. That's certainly within stage 3. But then if we're doing something that perhaps he doesn't want to do, he'll default to this stage 1 gestalt. I don't have to. And so I'm like, okay, that is a stage 1 gestalt that we haven't broken, and that is okay. He is still certainly further along in the stages, even though he might go back to this stage 1 gestalt occasionally. Now, something that's a little bit more advanced, stage 4, 5, and 6, is where we see beginning grammar. That's the use of more complex sentences. So something that we would love to hear, even though it's grammatically incorrect, the monster goed under. And the reason I say that is because we know that the Reggie, I see your question. Just a second. The question of the monster goed under the bed. We know that the child did not hear somebody say the word goed, and so that means that they're generating it themselves. That they're piecing together these grammar rules and this vocabulary in a way to create something that's uniquely theirs. Now, Reggie asked the question, how do we break that reversion back to stage 1 in those instances? And the answer is that we flood them with gestalts that they can use to break that. So in the example that I gave of, like, I don't have to, I know that I would say something like, "Oh, I don't want to," or "Let's do something different." Again, kind of like thinking about what function does that have for, sorry, as I'm trying to click back, what function does that have for the child? So it's a protest. I don't have to. But what else we can say is, I don't like it, or stop doing that. Don't touch it. Let's do something different. Giving them other ways that they can fulfill the same communicative function. Um, and so I hope that that answers the question. Um, that's what I would do in those situations.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
When you're talking about function, and maybe this was a better question when we were talking about echolalia, but um, a lot of times our daughter will say something and she'll want us to repeat what she's saying, and she'll do it like 5 times in a row, and I'll say it the same way each time, and then she'll finally stop after a few times. I don't really know what function that is, serving.
Yeah, and Chelsea, I hear that, and we at the clinic we've also run into that, and so the other SLPs and I have kind of we've been thinking like, is that something that the kid just wants to hear because it's regulating, so something that I've posed to the SLPs who like have a situation like this is like, say it again, I like it, something like that. And if we were to be correct that that is what they would want to for you to do, then we might have that like aha moment, where the kids are like, you understand me. I don't know if that's exactly relevant to what you're talking about, or the situation that that your child is in, but that is something that like that at our clinic we are exploring because we run into it a lot as well. So what I would do is like, say it again, I like the way it sounds, and then repeat whatever the statement is. I hope that that's helpful. Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
Yeah, I hope that that makes sense too. The as I talk about GLP and just language acquisition in general, I'll also talk about things that are well regulating to the kids. And so perhaps that is something that's like they just like the way that it sounds. And so we have to give them that language to express that that's what they want to talk about. So, but for example, like, I like talking about letters. Let's talk about letters. Or like, I like the way that that sounds. Let's listen again. Like that kind of language. Um, Christine, go ahead.
Yeah, so my son does the same thing as Chelsea's daughter. So are you saying that yeah, and he will not stop saying it until like we repeat it?
Yeah.
Are we saying that like them wanting us to repeat what they're saying is like an affirmation?
That's actually a really good point. That perhaps sometimes, yes. Something that I'm like quite conscious of is that in a lot of spaces outside of the safety of our homes, or outside of the safety of the clinic, and with people who can take the time to understand the like our GLPs, is that sometimes these kids just spend so much time not being understood that to just be validated is so affirming, right? To be like, I heard what you said and I'm here with you. So just the act of repeating it can be affirming to the kids too. I hope that that connects that point as well. That
Yeah.
at the very least, we can just affirm that we heard them.
Well, if my child has taken it like one step further, where he wants me to repeat what he said, but once I affirm it, it pisses him off.
Oh,
He was looking for the affirmation that it was true, but once he got it, he was not happy about it. So it was
okay.
Bye-bye to something, or whatever, and then or like bye-bye Legos for now, and then bye-bye Legos for now. And he was like, oh, I don't want to say bye-bye to my Legos. I'm just confirming that that's what you're saying that I need to do. And then once I confirm it, he gets really mad about it.
I see.
Isn't it exhausting, Christine?
Oh my God. The
Yeah,
meltdown? Yeah, totally.
I'm sure it is. And that does seem like it's more of an area about like accepting the transition or parting from something that's really preferred. Um, Perhaps more than it is like a language like concern. But I totally see how it's relevant. And so I don't know if I have the best advice regarding that, but just with some like strategies that like that maybe we can incorporate, like using first then language or kind of using visuals to supplement how we can transition away from something that's really preferred. I do hear the connecting point about the repetition of it. And so for that, I I don't know if I have the best advice for that part. But that's something that I've noted here, and if I think of anything else, we can come back to that too.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anthony, can I follow up with what was said before about the repeating words, but instead of words, also the tone? Because that's my issue. It's more like he wants me to repeat certain things, but it has to be the tone I think that he wants it to be or that he remembers of. And if I don't do the right tone, he'll keep wanting me to repeat it until I get the correct tone he wanted.
Sure. Yes, Natalie, that's actually a really great point that I'm going to talk about later on. So let's hold that thought for a little bit. It is quite relevant. I see something in the chat as well. Speaking about repetition, I'm wondering if there is a way you use to tease out difference between scripting and auditory stimming. Now I don't know, but this is actually a topic that I've been reading about and thinking about a lot, in that we as adults who I don't, and no one has to disclose this, but okay, I can talk about myself. How's that? As an SLP who does not have autism, I have started to kind of struggle with how I can talk about stimming in a way that is affirming to the individual, that is like encapsulating of what's like what's actually true, what's observable, as opposed to, well, I know that this person has autism and they're doing something that is quote unquote unusual, and so I'm just going to call it stimming. And so I'm still on that like quest of how we can talk about what these habits are that kids with autism exhibit, in a way that is on the same platform as how I would talk about my own habits or the habits of a person who does not have autism. And so, but to answer the question about like scripting and auditory stimming, I think that it kind of goes back to the same point about I just like the way that it sounds, like that could be it. And there's a regulation piece that might come into that as well. So that might not be the best answer to the question, but I do want to encourage some reflection there about how we can like talk about how we can talk about kids with autism in the same way that we talk about kids without autism, and I choose to talk about like about like habits as opposed to stimming, but but I think that I digress from that. But that is something that we can certainly talk more about too when I see you in person, Emily. Okay, so we have about 11 minutes left, and I wanted to show a quick clip of what stage 2 gestalts can look like. Now, this is a video that I know has some glitches in it, so you might see some lags, and that's okay. That's how it was. Okay, let's see.
The original Gestalt, but I definitely talk about it all the time. So you may have heard me mention it in the past, but this is Lucy, and her original Gestalt was "Don't worry, I'll help you find your mama." And that was from Dora, a Dora show, where some little creatures had lost their mother. And she kind of used it every time something was misplaced or we couldn't locate something, even sometimes when we couldn't do something. So this video kind of shows just a beautiful mitigation from that original Gestalt.
Okay. I think it's under caterpillar.
Okay, this is the normal lag that I talked about, so just stay tuned.
Oh. It's empty. Don't worry, you'll find a ball.
Okay. So you can see that that the child, like as Alexandria said, had this longer gestalt of "Don't worry, I'll help you find your mama," which is from a Dora the Explorer show, as she later explains. And then she changes it. So she, in stage 2, she mitigates it. "Don't worry, you'll find the ball." And that's an example of mixing and matching. Now, just to make sure that we're moving along, we can take a moment to think, and you guys don't have to share, just to make sure that we're kind of progressing through the presentation. But just take a moment to think about some of the scripts that you hear from your child. Some things that I know that I hear are like, "I have a surprise for you," or "Mr. Anthony, what color is your shirt?" Or something that I did not have the context for it at the time was just "monkey chase," which I actually included on another slide too. But you can think about your own child's gestalts. If you wanted to share some in the chat while I move forward with the presentation, you're welcome to do so. That way the other parents can see as well. Now, this is something that my colleague saw on Twitter. My friend's toddler babbled, "Don't forget to subscribe," as he was put to bed. Kid watches so much YouTube that he thought it means goodbye. Now, is that a Gestalt or is that an analytic language processor? Like, without having the context of the speaker, sounds like it's a Gestalt. "Don't forget to like and subscribe. Goodbye." So again, what function does that hold for the person? Perhaps it's a way to say goodbye or to part from a situation or a person. Now, again, this is just a summary, excuse me, of analytic language development, starting at one word and expanding to sentences and conversation, and then Gestalt language development, which has this whole script that we then break down into individual units of speech. That the individual, so again, that's what I used to talk about, like speech segmentation or word segmentation, where we start to understand that individual words hold their own meaning, as opposed to this whole gestalt holding that meaning. Now, this is, I think, something that you all really want to know, is the do's and do nots for interacting with GLPs. I'm conscious of the time right now. However, I don't have anywhere to be after this. So if you would like to stay on, you're welcome to. And if you have to leave, that is okay. This is something that we can revisit next time as well. So let's start with the clip, okay? I think this is it. Yep.
Red star first.
A red star.
I'm just gonna
Okay.
rewind it a little bit.
Let's find a
Star. Red star first.
a red star. Okay. Let's find the red star. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Where's baby?
Where's the red star?
Red star. Where's the red?
Where? Yes. Where is it?
Where is
Where
it?
is it?
Matthews, do you want
Help.
Help.
do you want help?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Let me see if I can
Look. I got it.
I got it, he says at the end. So something that I like with I think it's an SLP in the video. What she does is that she validates all of the language that he used and provides natural models. So let's like, where is it? Is a natural model that just kind of happens in the context of the activity that they're doing. We can use lots of intonation to match the child's intonation if we can. That's something that Natalie brought up a little bit ago about having to say the same thing in the same intonation. We can sing songs, which if you've come into any of my sessions, I do that quite a lot. Follow their interests. You know, the kids come to the table with a desire to do what they want to do for that day. One of the kids who I can have an entire lesson plan ready to go. And if the kid comes to the table with, let's go to a castle, let's play castle, then I kind of have to put to the side the things that I wanted to do that day and focus on the kid's interests. With the idea that we have to validate that I understood them. Their interests do matter in a world that message might not always be communicated to them. We can validate that I understand you and I'm here with you. Child-led learning is it does. I imagine that you as a parent would see that it helps so much. I'm just looking at the chat. Provide regulation activities with one of the kids that comes to see me after school. I pull from his sensory diet that I get from OT. Let's climb through the lycra swing. Let's show me some bear crawls. Go climb up the ladder. All those kinds of things. And then something that I think that even if you don't know what to do, perhaps the biggest thing to do is to model from the kid's perspective. So using I or we, us pronouns as opposed to you and me. I'm sorry, you or he and she. So that's because a lot of with me and you language, if I say I or me, it refers to me, Anthony. But if you say it, it refers to you. And so we model from the kid's perspective so that if they were to repeat it, if they were to demonstrate that echolalia, then they're not wrong. And then other things to do, of course, is to consult your child's SLP. A lot of the information that I've given today is generally accepted, but it might not be accepted specifically for your child. Your child SLP would know better about your child than I would. And then advocate for neuroaffirming treatment plans. Now, we are at our clinic, we are more than happy to collaborate with the school if your child does not attend our academy and only attends the clinic. And we would advocate that the goals that are written in their IEPs are neuroaffirming and are GLP affirming, as opposed to what is quote unquote more traditional. At our clinic and academy, we have the luxury of collaborating across all disciplines. And so that means that our approach to treating your child is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, meaning that the SLP is providing advice as well, like in your child's treatment plan, whether it's just in speech or in ABA, OT, etc. Now, I know that it's 1 o'clock, but like I said, I don't have, like, I'm not rushed, but if you do have to go, I totally understand, and we can always just do a review for next time. But go ahead. I hear someone talking.
Sorry, will this recording be provided later?
Yes, that's something that I can talk to Natalie about as well. I just want to at least get through these next few slides, and then we can call it from there. Sorry, this was do you have to go? Okay. Actually, I think that now that I'm looking ahead, I think that the content that we're going to talk about is actually more in depth than that the time will allow anyway. So let's just call it, because we've already talked about a lot, and we've already asked great questions. So let me I do have an addendum for next week. What I want to do is continue with this presentation, allow for some Q&A, but I also want to especially talk about GLP and AAC. And so that was something that was not included in the course description, but that I think would be really beneficial to you all too. Natalie, do you have anything to say?
The only thing that I have to add, based off of, and this is something that you guys can collaborate further on with Anthony, as well as any of your SLPs, but I want to add for the IEPs for your kids, when they're at school, GLP is a fairly new concept to many SLPs. So you may not hear a lot of that verbiage and those kind of outcomes within the IEP, because some of those school-based SLPs may not be very familiar with it. So don't fret, don't get, upset or like, oh my gosh, these people aren't competent enough to take my kid into school. What am I going to do? You have a great group of SLPs here at CPTWC who can help to collaborate with them to help provide more information, as well as goals and programming and how successful the child has been with us here at the academy, as well as at the clinic. So don't fret. I do want to put that out there that many SLPs within the school system may not be as knowledgeable within this area, but that doesn't mean that they're not competent enough to take this information and help progress your child further. So just want to put that caveat out there, because I know some people are like, oh my gosh, my SLP doesn't know this. Why do they not know this? This is like common knowledge. It may not be as common as we think, because it's still a very new concept to many SLPs. So just want to put that out there with regards to IEP. With regards to the question about the recording, we will send out the recording and the slides. What I do is I send it to Chase, our marketing person, who puts it with a backdrop of the slides. So it's kind of like a voiceover situation so that you can see everything and hear everything. Once that's ready, I'll send it to everybody on the Sign Up Genius, as well as it will be in a YouTube link that anybody can access within the company. So might take us just a little bit to get that all prepared, but we will for sure send that out to you guys. Awesome. All right. I'm going to